Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your greeting. As a matter of interest, how many of you here were in UCLA about 13 months ago when I was talking? Okay, I'm just working out a few things I may have to say to the rest of you, which you will be familiar with, but never mind. When I first went to the Middle East, which was 1972, I was a correspondent in Belfast, and I thought I knew what war was about. Of course, I was wrong. But when I arrived in Cairo, I found a very old phrase book, not knowing a word of Arabic, which had obviously been copied from some early English imperial phrase book of Arabic into English. And I remember 3 phrases which were thought to be applicable in this phrase book to visiting Englishmen in the Middle East. The first was, "We shall board the steamer, for there is talk of war." Very helpful as a tourist in Egypt. The second one was, "Help." And the third one, of course, was, "Where is the British Embassy?" It was interesting to note that this summer, at last, it all came true in Beirut. Everyone was boarding steamers because there was talk of war. Not the Lebanese, of course, unless they had the privilege of having British or French or American or other foreign passports. Those who only had the famous pariah passport with the cedar tree on, they had to stay behind. Indeed, everyone was looking for the British Embassy and the French Embassy and the American Embassy, and everyone was saying help, and all the rest were left behind. I remember one morning writing a story in my paper saying, "How brave our warships looked this dawn," before, of course, they all ran away with our people on board, leaving the Lebanese to their fate. I'm not going to talk to you about the book which I wrote a year ago, which came out a year ago, and soon is to come out in paperback here, mainly because anyone who buys a book of 1,000 pages about Middle East history by me obviously is not a person of judgment and sensitivity. I will tell you that the Arabic edition has just come out in 3 volumes in Beirut, has been badly received by Sharq al-Awsad. Of course, it's quite critical, my book of Saudi Arabia. I should also add that there's a very strange phenomenon that's happened with the Great War for Civilization, which, of course, is a title I took from my father's First World War medal. And that is that everywhere that the book was well reviewed, particularly in France, for example, where some reviewer was kind enough to refer to my swimming pool blue eyes, which I was unaware of before. And the book ticked along at 15,000 for the first edition, which is comfortable and nice, but not exactly a bestseller. But the amazing thing was, and maybe one of you will explain this to me later, but everywhere the book was badly reviewed, and snottily reviewed, and reviewed with contempt, it became a bestseller. It just went through the roof. In Britain, where people managed to attack me from every angle. One person even managed to claim that I said that Jesus was born in Jerusalem. There is no such claim in the book. In the last 2 months, the paperback edition has sold 52,000 copies in the United Kingdom. So I'm happy to tell you that almost every review in the mainstream American press was absolutely revolting about the book. Long may it remain so. The Economist won my prize for reviewers by saying that although the book was pretty terrible, nonetheless the reviewer wished to praise my account of the entry of the Israeli army into Beirut in 1982, which was very flattering. The only problem was that that particular description was in my previous book written 20 years ago. So as I always say about The Economist, half right. Right author, wrong book. You will be, those of you, I think it must be more than half this audience who are Armenian, you will be interested to know that the Turkish edition comes out in January. There is in my book a whole chapter on the Armenian genocide. The Turkish translation has been sent through my auspices to one of my best Armenian friends in Beirut who speaks fluent Turkish. He's actually the guy who translates English into Turkish for the Associated Press news agency in Beirut, and he proclaimed it an absolutely brilliant translation. It's absolutely spot on. Of course, I've been invited to give lectures about the Armenian genocide in Istanbul and Ankara in January, and I shall be looking forward to doing so. However, 2 weeks ago, I received the following email from my Turkish publisher. You know what's coming, don't you? Dear Robert Fisk, this is from Mr. Osman Akinhay of Agora Books, who is bravely intending to publish this notorious and terrible volume by Mr. Bob. Dear Robert Fisk, below I have summarised the recent situation about the publication process of your book. The whole translation of your book has not been published yet, but it will be in January. We have inspected chapter 10, entitled The First Holocaust. Some people have probably read this notorious volume of mine, so you'll know it's referring to the Armenian genocide. And it has been read thoroughly by our lawyers. And it is very likely that the owner of the publishing house, the translator, and Robert Fisk will be sued due to the 301 clause of the law, by means of which tens of authors, he means dozens of course, and journalists have been sued, apart from Orhan Pamuk and Elif Shafak. The reason for including the publishing house into the trial resides, this is bad English but I'm reading it literally, resides from the nationality of the author, where Robert Fisk is a foreign citizen and he is out of reach. In other words, I can go there, they can put my publishers on trial, but not me. In such a case, my Turkish publishers tell me, there are two possibilities. Either Robert Fisk will not be included into the trial, since he is a foreigner, but if he applies to the court, he can choose to be put on trial in Turkey. That will be up to him. Well, I can tell you right now, ladies and gentlemen, if 301 is applied to the publishers, it will be a privilege to go on trial with them, because then in a Turkish court I can give the details of what happened in the Armenian genocide, the first Holocaust of the last century at the hands of the Turkish Ottoman government, which I shall do, although I rather suspect they won't give me the option. I do notice, by the way, that there is, of course, as you will know, a Jewish Holocaust conference going on in Iran, or was this week. President Ahmadinejad, whom I think is pretty cracked, is obviously trying to score another cheap point. And I think it is outrageous that the Iranians, with their extraordinary history and pride and honour, should demean themselves to put on a conference, I put that in quotation marks, with all the usual cocktail of hideous Holocaust deniers, to try and claim that 6 million Jews did not die in the Second World War. They did. They absolutely did. And as far as I'm concerned, that conference is as outrageous as all its critics have said. I could not help noticing, however, that when asked for a comment, our dear Tony Blair, my own dear Tony Blair, whom I always refer to in my articles as Lord Blair of Kut al Amara. Kut al Amara, as most of you will know, was the greatest British defeat of the First World War at the hands of the Ottoman army, said that he was, this is a response to the conference in Iran, he was shocked with disbelief, whatever that means. I was particularly struck too because, of course, this is the same Mr. Blair who did his best to make sure that the Armenians could not participate in the British Holocaust Day, which he himself invented, because he did not want another genocide. He only wanted one. I remember too very well the way in which Shimon Peres, when he was foreign minister, went to Turkey and said there wasn't a genocide, it was just an unfortunate event. He went along with the Turks. And I have to tell you that such is the precious nature of the relationship between Iran and Turkey that I'm sure that President Ahmadinejad would never dare to hold a conference proving that the Armenian genocide happened. Amazing, isn't it, to find that the Israeli government and the British government and the Iranian government may be on the same side in Holocaust denial. Well, I think the Middle East is primarily not about handing democracy to people. We love to give democracy to people in the Middle East. We always arrive, from the days of the Crusades, with our horses and our swords and our Apache helicopters and our M1A1 Abrams tanks and our Bradley fighting vehicles and our Humvees and our soldiers. We always arrive to bring democracy to the Middle East. Napoleon promised freedom from the Pashas to the people.